If you didn't recognize the music just played, let me introduce the Grateful Dead, one of America's most interesting bands. In this video, I will provide some brief background on the band, but the focus of this video will be their music. Over the last 50 years, the Dead have played a role in the changing culture that surrounds their music and have an incredible backstory that few musical artists or groups can compare with. The Grateful Dead were founded in San Francisco in 1965. I could walk through all of the members of the band, but there's been a rotating cast through the years, and listing them all out would take a long time. I will, however, mention the one member that many people have probably heard of, Jerry Garcia. He was the lead vocalist and lead guitarist for the band, and was often seen as the leader of the group, and is certainly the most significant member of the band. He's often been portrayed as the hippie godfather in popular culture. The Dead are often identified as a major player in the 60s counterculture. They got their breakthrough at Woodstock in 1969, which I'm sure all of you have heard of that particular festival. The band toured across the U.S. for over 30 years until Jerry died in 1995. While this video could have been made specifically to detail the history of the band, given there are plenty of fascinating facts that could be discussed, I would like to shift the focus to the band's music. When it comes to the Grateful Dead's music catalog, there's no specific genre that the band can be placed into. Their music incorporates elements of rock, blues, folk, jazz, psychedelia, among many others. During the 30 years that the band was together, they produced over a dozen studio albums. However, with the exception of one album titled In the Dark, none of the Grateful Dead's albums were major commercial successes. Most people would judge a group's success on how many albums they've sold, but despite this notion, the Grateful Dead did not become a cultural icon because of the music they produced in the studio, but rather because of the music they produced live at their concerts. Turning to the band's live musical performances, the true substance of the Grateful Dead is more clear. If any of you have been to a live rock or hip-hop performance, you've probably noticed that the songs are performed to replicate the sound of the studio recordings. For instance, the guitar solos in a standard rock concert are usually meant to be as close, if not note for note identical, to the studio recorded solo. The Grateful Dead could not be farther from the mainstream in this aspect. Instead of mimicking their studio albums, the Dead never played a song the same way twice, despite playing their songs thousands of times over the years. This is because the band would engage in extensive improvisation sessions throughout the course of their songs. Furthermore, where most bands and artists have a predetermined 1 hour-long set list of their hit songs, the Grateful Dead shows would be 3 hours long, and they never walked into a gig with a predetermined set list. Essentially, they would just step out on stage and start calling out songs that they wanted to play. Jerry once remarked that they couldn't play any of their hits because they didn't have any hits. As a result of these aspects, each show they played had a completely different vibe. The band was notorious for having bad nights where they couldn't get into a rhythm. Band members have stated that they played horribly at all of their major gigs, most notably Woodstock in 1969 and the Summer Jam at Watkins Glen in 1973. Both concerts had several 100,000 people in attendance. On the flip side, however, the band will be most fondly remembered for several dozen shows where they set the benchmark for great live musical performances. One night in particular stands out above the others. On May 22, 1977, the Dead played a legendary show at Cornell University's Barton Hall. The live recording of the performance was added to the National Recording Registry at the Library of Congress for being culturally and historically significant. Here's a brief glimpse into that incredible night. Turn your attention to the vintage Jerry Garcia guitar solo, but also try to be mindful of the complex rhythm his bandmates set up for him. This style of performance had a major impact on the band's journey and legacy. Because of their performance style, the band accumulated a cult following of fans widely known as the Deadheads. These fans would travel vast distances to see the Dead play in hopes of catching one of the classic performances. Some Deadheads recall attending hundreds of shows over the years, and at the height of their popularity in the 1980s and 1990s, the Grateful Dead would consistently sell out football stadiums with 60,000 in attendance on a regular basis. And each year, they played in front of roughly 1.5 million fans. Jerry Garcia has described this phenomenon in an interesting way. The Grateful Dead are like licorice. You either like it or you don't, but if you like it, you really like it. Many fans assert that the Grateful Dead were the best band playing the best music in the world. In conclusion, I think it is fair to say that the Grateful Dead have a story unlike any other musical group or artist. They also play their music in a way that differentiates them from most of the bands and artists that have come and gone over the years. As a result, the Grateful Dead legacy has endured for 20 years since Jerry's passing and the band formally disbanding. However, you can catch a glimpse of the glory days by attending a Dead & Company concert during their summer tour this year. I highly recommend this to anyone seeking 60s and 70s nostalgia. Thank you for watching.